Yo, what's up bros? Welcome to the long-awaited part 20 of this series, and this is the best part so far, especially the later part of the video. If you're new here, subscribe now to become a bro today, and because I post recaps every single day, we're on that daily grind, boy, and as always, enjoy in the video. Now we see G standing on a spacious balcony, gazing out in the distance, asking Kay and Max if the men of spiders have arrived. Max confirms their arrival and says that they gathered all of their men in order to attack the white wolves. Sensing that it's probably their last base out there, G decisively explains that attacking this place would be their final battle with the White Wolf clan, which could also be the end of the Magic Mirror event, making her revenge come to an end. She further explains that it doesn't matter how strong the new batch of hunters is, because if they don't get acknowledged by other organizations, they won't be able to stand their ground. Kay and Max just stood there listening to G saying that the conflict between the spiders and white wolves is happening because there's no need for two large-scale hunter organizations in Nokken, and that's why they have to be exterminated. Miss G then recalls the times when Kaki told her about the tainted blood formula, which is the most important thing to white wolves. By the way bros, this Kaki guy was the guy Miss G found dead in the church when she invaded the church with Kay and Max. His name wasn't Kaki, I don't remember his name, but I don't feel bad about not remembering his name because even the authors don't remember his name. They should have given like all the characters Attack on Titan names like Ackerman, so everybody would remember them easily. Anyway, back to the story. G was surprised that he wanted to tell her the top secret of the organization despite her being promoted to just the third leader of the White Wolves organization. Kaki, being the second leader, told her she might take over his position and said that Helix personally ordered him to bring her so he can talk to her. After they enter Helix's residence and Kaki asks him about tainted blood formula research, mentioning that he fulfilled his order by bringing Miss G. Helix, the first leader of White Wolf's clan, looks at them with a terrifying expression on his face, asking if this is G Bongong's famous daughter. Miss G nervously observes Helix, thinking he's staring at her like when an evil wolf stares at its prey. Helix senses Miss G's great potential and assigns her to lead a part of the White Wolf's organization. He then passes her a part of the original formula from the White Wolf clan, saying she needs it because fresh blood of the Dream Beast is very toxic, proposing she uses this to train her subordinates. He instructs Miss G to master and perfect the formula, and only then she can create hunters, since the current formula is harsh and very few make it out alive after the first injection, but the ones who do survive would greatly increase their power. Standing on the balcony, Miss G tells Max and Kay about the tainted blood formula. She also thinks about how she needs to cover her source of information so Ryan's soul could have more space for improvement. Miss G finds a way to do it, and wanting to put an end to this, sends Max to investigate and locate the original formula and tells Kay to order the killing of all the White Wolf's hunters except one. A few moments later, the battle on the 52nd Street started. Meanwhile, there was a heavily wounded man sitting in the sewers looking as if he cannot move while rats are eating his leg up. A group of white wolves have approached him, and one of them stepped on his leg and crushed it, and then another one of them grabbed his hair and slit his throat like a savage. These white wolves had a crazy look in their eyes, veins popping on their faces with razor-sharp teeth. They looked like zombies, literally. They turned into wolves and ate the man's flesh until there were only bones left. Now we see the chamber where the spawn of the magic mirror needs to hatch, and we can see tainted blood pouring into a pool-like hole in the sewers with body parts falling into it as Helix arrives and stands there saying that the plan is going smoothly. There's an Amazonian looking like lady named Theresa who approaches Helix and tells him that they successfully injected excessive amounts of tainted blood in everyone, and how now they'll become irrational and their only purpose would be killing. Helix mentions that it doesn't matter if someone is human or not, and as long as the spawn of the magic mirror can be born, he would be prepared to sacrifice as many people as possible. He tells Teresa to prepare new fuel as she tosses a carcass into the pool of tainted blood. While the carcass is fallen, before it reaches the ground, it bursts in green flames as Helix stands and watches it burn, thinking that the altar looks like a huge fire pile. Looking down at the fire, he realizes that everything thrown into it starts blazing immediately, but just until there's enough energy provided for the incubation of the spawn of the magic mirror. Helix's heart was filled with darkness as he stood in front of the egg and watched it incubate, hearing the sound of the flames. The egg seemed to be incubated healthily at a fast pace as Helix smiled at a beautiful view, feeling the whole place shake, and he associated this feeling as the one of a heartbeat, thinking how this is the heartbeat of the spawn of the magic mirror. He stood in front of it, spreading his hands in the air and calling the egg his Lord and Savior, promising to guard its arrival at all costs, knowing that soon enough he and his men will no longer have to hide and live like gutter rats. He recalls the words of the snake-eyed mysterious man and realizes that the event is unfolding exactly how he said. With hands on his back, he proudly watched the green flames blaze, thinking to himself how dark wizards' bodies are indeed a good fuel, and thanks to them, the incubation speed is doubled. The dark wizard lost their hope after Murphy died, and their pride and ego destroyed them in a way that Helix provoked them, and then they were just dumb enough to fall into his trap. These dark wizards he's talking about are probably the Scarlet Cult, which belonged to Murphy, but for some reason all the names are changed. Maybe the translator changed for this manhwa as well. So yeah, he's probably talking about the dark wizards from the Murphy's Scarlet Cult. And after falling into Helix's trap, these wizards then surrendered, and now here they are, being used as fuel. Helix knew the dark wizards communicate with ether and have a high ether affinity, so their flesh is perfect to be used as a fuel for this ritual. He was still not sure why the snake-eyed man wanted to help and rescued him, and wondered if he was his life savior, thinking that even if it's some kind of a snake-eyed man's trap, it's still worth stepping into it. Now we know it's a fact that feeding through this ritual is far more efficient than extracting the life force. Even now, the snake-eyed man's words sound a bit scary, since he ordered to burn the whole city of Nokin to ashes and bring nightmares and suffering to everyone. He convinced Helix that doing exactly this is his destiny, and now we see the first sacrificial ceremony being carried out by Helix. He caused havoc in Nokin and almost eradicated every single dark wizard from the Scarlet Cult, but knew it was far from enough and he needed to do more. As he couldn't keep his eye from the magnificent green flames, Teresa arrived, informing him about having no more dark wizards to burn, asking if they should continue hunting, though it might be quite dangerous doing so. Helix feels displeased with this information, knowing that even though there are no more dark wizards, they still need way more sacrifices. He puts his hand on Teresa and makes a decision, saying they should stop hunting. Teresa knew what he was talking about, and she blushed standing next to Helix as if she was ready for whatever awaits her. Their intimate moment gets interrupted by one of his men who arrives injured and covered in blood, reporting that the spiders have found him and discovered their stronghold, saying they are nearby. As Helix asked if they were finally here, Teresa looked at him as a lover would look at his loved one. With hate and disgust on his face, Helix utters a name, Jijitsu, and says she's more annoying than the knights of the secret instrument tower. Knowing her arrival means the 52nd Street is not safe anymore. Teresa brings a tainted blood injection, and Helix tells Duo Gang, the huge man, to take it as it is a destiny of a White Wolf hunter and it would make him fear nothing and no one. But Duo Gang looks at the injection with fear and terror as if he's not sure whether he wants to take it or not. Helix then calls Theresa, and with excitement and love in her eyes for what's about to happen, she says it's an honor for her to become one with him. She decapitates her head and offers it to Helix, wishing him victory. Helix takes her head, and as the green flame burns the skull, he puts it on his face. Helix knew that everything in the stronghold would be destroyed anyways, and if they wanted to come in there would be no way out. He calls Duo Gang to come with him as he steps on the remains of Theresa's scalp. Duo Gang stands up after injecting himself with the tainted blood and follows his master. 52nd Street was in chaos because of the battle, and we can see G and K side by side fighting quite fiercely. An explosion happens and they stop for a moment, trying to figure out if that was the place where they could find Helix. Now, after they realize that it's no wonder how the White Wolf clan could escape from the secret instrument tower and the True Society all these years, she notices a gigantic 50 meters deep hidden tunnel. Kay and Miss G stood at the edge of the hole and took a look down, seeing what G thought was a hellish picture of death. Skulls and arm and leg bones were everywhere, and the longer they looked, it made them feel worse. Miss G thought there's no way this was an act of a human, knowing it must be something that only the White Wolf mutants could have done. She turned her head away and started walking away, as she recalled hearing these kinds of stories before about the evil acts done by the White Wolf clan, which included massacre too. What really made her concerned was all the butchered bodies, as she never expected they would do that kind of atrocity, thinking that this act must have been going on for some time and that this might be just one of the many sites. Now Duo Gang appeared behind her from the underground and fiercely tried to attack her. Miss G stopped, realizing she made a mistake by not being careful enough, and tried to think of a way to dodge this attack. Kay screams, but Duo Gang slams his fist towards G, wanting to smash her, but we see Kay swiftly intervenes, holding her weapon in the air and blocking Duo Gang's attack. Kay starts coughing blood, telling Duo that with her around, nobody should attack Miss G, calling him a fatso. Miss G, seeing what just had happened, screams in anger and startles Duo Gang. She jumps forward with sword, aiming for Duo's head, and piercing his body makes a huge hole. Then she quickly turns around and hits him with a leg kick in the stomach, despite him already missing one arm and the head due to her piercing attack. Now Kay looks at Miss G with great admiration, as G worryingly asks her if she's fine. Kay then collapses and Miss G holds her, telling her that she wasn't even a target of the attack and she didn't have to take on the attack. Miss G also tells Kay that she'll need at least a few weeks to recover from the attack. Wounded, but with a smile on her face, Kay told Miss G that it was her duty to protect her and that she couldn't bear seeing her injured, and she apologizes for causing Miss G to worry. Showing great concern, Miss G tells Kay that it's not her fault and apologizes for the incident. Miss G tells Kay to hold on and orders her team members to take her to the base for treatment. Miss G's steel mind instinct activates and she realizes that Duo is still alive and might attack them again, and at the same time the enemies are firing tower arrows towards them, so she quickly alerts her team and picks them up, bringing them to safety. The spears hits Duo and cause a huge explosion, setting Duo on fire. Astonished by her strength and speed, they promise her they'll leave immediately since it's too dangerous for them to stay. Miss G notices that one of the spears has the White Wizard's lightning inscription, thinking the inscription was probably the cause of the explosion. One of the lightning spears hit the roof where G was standing, but G jumps in the air, dodging the electricity. Miss G swiftly turns around and sees the tainted blood pouring down the cliff. She walked towards it in hope to find Helix, and then she finally sees him. She calls his name, gritting her teeth in anger. Helix stood at the top of a building with his comrades, with the sky behind him ablaze with lightning bolts. With the mask made of Theresa's skull on his face, he greets G and tells her she's gotten stronger. He takes a step forward and jumps down, slamming the ground with great force, landing right in front of Miss G. He tells her she's been lucky to gain full control over the tainted blood and asks her if that bookstore owner helped her in that endeavor. They stood across each other with their claws out, ready to start the fight. Helix told Miss G that Mr. Lin is nowhere to be seen and he won't come to her rescue now. G looks at the huntsmen surrounding and protecting Helix and asks him what happened to them, realizing they are looking kind of abnormal. The demon-like huntsman stood there while Helix explained that he just used a highly concentrated tainted blood and now they are going berserk, plus their strength increased by multiple times and they became able to remain conscious in their beast form. He further explains, saying that the only drawback was that if they become unable to remain in control in berserk mode, they would all explode and die. Then he raises and spreads his arms as if he's threatening to attack and says that as long as they can move, they're the perfect killing machine. Helix continues the monologue in laughter, saying he had to use his life in exchange for power G easily obtained, complaining about the life being unfair. G cusses at Helix and tells him that he is the one doing harm to the huntsman and promises to eradicate him and free those poor souls from suffering. She looks at him with determination, saying he's the horrible one, and asks whether these are his last men he has gathered to fight against her. Miss G also tells him that she didn't know her 1-month-old huntsman group has such influence, so he had to intervene and fight her, and that they didn't even gather like this even when they were fighting the Secret Instrument Tower or the Truth Society. Terrifying looking Helix tells Miss G he won't retreat until one of them dies in their battle and the survivor's side would be the future of all hunters. Miss G talks back, telling Helix to stop mumbling like a cuckoo, and she transforms into a wolf, saying that it's time to settle the vengeance and to prepare to die. Helix invites her to attack first, and Miss G opens her beast-like mouth, saying she can't wait to tear off his throat, but also thinking that the taste of his blood must be extreme. They square off and start running at each other at the same time, and the fight to death between beasts ensues. G thinks that in their final fight, she believed she could win, but maybe she underestimated his madness considering the uneasiness she felt during the fight. Miss G bites his neck, and now she knows that the hunters with the conscious blood lack the strength to face against the White Wolf hunters because they have the strength of the tainted blood. She feels it would be shameless of her to let her subordinates face heavy casualties as she tries to fight Helix, hitting him on the neck with her razor-sharp paw and making him bleed. Miss G really wanted to cause as few casualties as possible, wishing the newcomers could read her intention, which was to escape from the place as soon as possible. Now we see a girl with blue hair running away from the battlefield with hope to report the situation to the leader, seeing that the White Wolf guys are on a rampage. She looks back and starts crying, knowing her leader's intention was to save her and all of her team members. Everything was going as planned as she fought side by side with her squad leader, but a large number of monstrous beings appeared and surrounded her, K-Max and other guys. They screamed at them, causing horrendous sounds, and attacked them, but they didn't have any strength trying to fight them, so the battle turned into a one-sided slaughter as the monsters killed some of their team members in just a few seconds, leaving no space for escape. She recalled being attacked by one of the White Wolf guys, and just as she was about to get killed, she closed her eyes, not wanting to see the scary monster in front of her, but shortly later she heard a loud gunshot being fired. As she opened her eyes, she saw a cowboy boot and lots of shells falling on the floor and a voice telling her to run. It was her squad leader, a guy in a cowboy outfit quite skilled in handling guns, telling her that one of them has to survive, promising her to hold them back. He yells at her, saying her name and ordering her to leave this dangerous place and find their leader. Pava, the girl's name, tries to object as if she wants him to go with her and survive, but he, with incredibly weird look on his eyes, guys, bros. What the hell? Why did they do my boy dirty like this with his eyes? What the hell? So back to the story, I'm sorry. He tells her to stop worrying about him because he, Iskar Virgil, is the Spider's first battle squad leader, and it wouldn't be a problem for him to hold them back or even beat them down. Now after his narcissistic introduction, Pava didn't hesitate at all and started sprinting as fast as she could following his instructions. She runs and thinks she'll never again say that his eyes are looking weird, but at that moment, Iskar gets attacked and hit by a red-masked mutant. The mutant then stood behind Pava and called her a weakling, and she panicked knowing he'd attack her wanting to kill her. She recognized this monster, wondering if he's the one Helix has talked about. She lifts up her skirt and picks up some throwing knives and throws them at the mutant. The mutant deflects the knives with ease and tells her knives are useless, kicking her in the face so powerfully that she flies back and collides with a pile of stones. Pava coughs blood and falls on the ground, seemingly unconscious. The mutant approaches her and stands in front of her, like calling her a weakling, saying she made him yawn as if he's trying to say that defeating her with such ease made him feel bored. He tells her he thought it would be a battle of strength because since it wasn't it would be the best for him to look for Miss G and fight her instead. He takes off his mask and sticks out his tongue like a maniac, telling her she's a lucky lady and she should be honored dying in the hands of him, Babar. He continues walking towards Pava, who lies down covered in ruins, and says out loud that Helix should give up his position to him since he dealt with Pava personally, calling her trash. Clenching her hand and holding onto some ropes, Pava shows sign of life which surprised Babar. He realizes that these steel wires were a trap made by Pava and finds her sneaky move quite interesting. Pava calculates that she has full control within the 20 meters of the wired area. She tells Babar to leave her and her squad leader alone if he doesn't want to get hurt, and he responds by saying she's an idiot if she thinks she can hurt him. Babar smiles at Pava's threat, saying he doesn't even have to lift a finger to destroy her iron wires, as he calls somebody named Clara, ordering her to cut and destroy the wires. A green-eyed, what seems to be a midget, jumps from the wall and snaps the wires with her mechanical legs with ease. Pava watches her in disbelief, not knowing what to do next since the wires were her last trick that she had. Clara then tells her that her threading skills aren't so bad, but using them to hurt somebody is a joke. Clara tells Babar she likes Pava and requests to bring her back to have fun, but Babar declines, saying she's his prey. While Clara keeps objecting in a childish way, Babar grabs Pava by hair and lifts her up, asking whether she's willing to be his plaything, and in return, he'd spare her and her, as Babar calls him, a goldfish-eyed squad leader. Babar yells in her ear, forcing her to say something nice about him and make him happy, but she calls him a bastard and tells him to dream on. Clara couldn't believe Pava would say such words as Babar angrily swung at her with his trident-like weapon. Pava screams and kneels on the floor with her hand on her face and one of her eyes on the ground. Babar. He dug out her eye and now he's standing above her, saying that she still doesn't fully understand her current situation, telling her he changed his mind about killing her. Babar puts his hand on her cheeks and opens her mouth. Then he leans his sharp trident-like weapon in and attempts to cut off her tongue since she called him a bastard using that tongue. Suddenly a bullet scratches Babar's cheek and Babar turns around only to find wounded Iskar covered in debris, aiming his gun at him. His gun was shaking and Iskar probably missed because he is heavily injured and exhausted, thus unable to aim properly. The goldfish-eyed squad leader looks at Babar with a smile and tells him he hurt him with the bullet shot. Pava calls the squad, looking scared and worrying about the squad leader's safety, but Babar tells him it looks like he's really eager to die. He then tells Clara she can have Pava and have fun with her, and Clara gets excited, saying she'd use her life skill to torture Pava for 7 days and 7 nights. Pava puts her hand forward as if she's trying to reach Babar and stop him from hurting the squad leader Iskar, thinking if this goes on, both of them would die, wondering if there's anything she could do to stop it. As Clara jumps at Pava's back, already looking like she wants to start torturing her, Pava recalls her leader, saying that everything that's happening is just a part of the Master's plan. She also thought that he doesn't care about their existence, and if she could, she would do anything if her squad leader could be saved. Babar stops next to her squad leader and picks and lifts him up when suddenly somebody in the distance comments how he's finally found the guys who are creating this mess and noise. The voice seemed to be louder and louder as if the person was approaching, saying that the Truth Society lacks efficiency and they've made him angry, complaining about being woken up and unable to sleep because of the noise Babar and the others have been making. Ackerman appears behind the wall and leans his elbow on it and carefully observes the crew that woke him up, asking them if they have any manners at all. With one hand in his pocket and smoking a cigarette, Ackerman keeps complaining, saying they've interrupted his sleep by causing lots of noise, killing someone in the middle of the night. Babar and Clara look at him in confusion, and Babar responds, telling him that he doesn't give a crap about his rest and threatening to kill him if he came to ruin his business. Babar again says he doesn't care who he is, but Ackerman says that he is indeed nobody of importance, but just a wandering solo hunter. Injured Pava wondered about Ackerman's identity as Clara pressed her head down on the ground, not giving her any chances of escaping. Babar starts laughing out loud, listening to Ackerman's introduction, asking him whether he's joking by saying he's a solo hunter, and Ackerman responds saying he's not joking, describing what a solo hunter actually is and degrading himself by saying that as every solo hunter, he too cannot get anything done. Ackerman and Babar keep staring at each other as Ackerman analyzes Babar's identity, saying that there are two organizations in Nokin. One of them is Spider and the other one is White Wolf Clan, concluding that having a naughty attitude and having a smell of a beast, Babar was definitely a White Wolf organization member. Ackerman said it was an eye-opener for him, seeing they got hurt, despite having two panicky rank hunters fighting two abnormal rank newbies. Babar felt a bit insulted and took a firm grip on his weapon, asking Ackerman if he's looking for trouble. Ackerman, still smoking his cigarette, replies saying he's not looking for trouble, but just trying to figure out how to silence the noise they produced. Then he asks them which side he should assist to speed up the process of making the area silent again, mentioning that there's maybe no need to choose the side since Babar approached him aggressively, so sides have been chosen already. Babar gritted his teeth, saying he definitely came to get himself killed, and advances trying to attack Ackerman and finish him quickly. Ackerman just stands there smoking his cigarette, then flicks it and dodges Babar's attack with ease. As the smoke clears away, thinking he hit and killed Ackerman, Babar disappointedly and surprisingly looks at the cigarette, but he hit with his staff and then looks to the side trying to figure out where Ackerman has gone. Clara feels Ackerman's presence, and a second later he grabs her face and does something to her chin that makes her very dizzy. She falls on the floor, unable to move or speak, as Ackerman asks Pava about her identity and the reason why the White Wolf is after her and her team. Covered in blood but with a glimpse of relief on her face, she introduces herself to Mr. Ackerman, saying she's a newbie from the Spider's first battle squad and thanks him for saving them. That information made Ackerman concerned, as he wondered whether the timing of the conflict between the Spider and White Wolf is just a coincidence or not. Pava, trying to get up on her feet, tells Ackerman they were ambushed and she was instructed to report the incident to the leader but was unable to do so because Babar interfered at a wrong moment. She said she felt helpless and too weak for an enemy as strong as Babar and expressed her gratitude to Ackerman for saving them. Pava recalled her squad leader saying that whatever happens is all part of the Master's plan. Ackerman gets concerned about Pava's statement and thinks that it is indeed all the bookkeeper Lynn's will. As Pava still tried to get up and stand on her legs, legs, Ackerman was in a deep thought, guessing Lynn must have helped Lady G to start a fight with the White Wolf and unite all hunters. Ackerman recalls Lynn's guidance to break free from the Truth Society and hinting him that Spider would provide him help. He concludes that White Wolf's pursuit of the Spider was not a coincidence, but just Mr. Lynn's master plan, and all of the events happening are a product of Lynn's enlightenment. Thinking that Lynn's master plan gave him a chance to let Lady G owe him a favor for smoother cooperation in the future, he starts believing that such a plan might seem random, but actually all of the steps are linked, and Mr. Lynn's far-sightedness is incredible, and since he feels he's a part of this chess game, he should play his part as well as he could. Ackerman injects the tainted blood into Pava's shoulder and she heals in seconds, feeling rejuvenated as her physical strength gets restored. Ackerman stood in front of Pava, explaining that he used the tainted blood to heal her wounds and telling her the tainted blood is a necessary item for all experienced hunters. He also says that the grade of her tainted blood isn't that bad since she healed quite quickly. Ackerman decides, since he already helped a few spiders, to see if he could help some more. He guarantees Pava and her team's safety, since leaving so many prey alone isn't the way of the hunter, such as himself. Ackerman then tells Pava to give his greetings to Miss G, and Pava rejoices hearing what Ackerman just said, wondering if he really meant it. Suddenly, a few syringes fall on the ground as Babar appears, injecting the tainted blood in his neck, mocking Pava and Ackerman, calling them trash and saying they have no idea how to maximize the blood's power. Babar's hand becomes hairy as if he's turning into a werewolf and calls himself a genius, explaining the best way of using the tainted blood is to increase the strength and control of one's brain and not going insane, maximizing the tainted blood's effect. He praises himself for his genius use of tainted blood as he holds his staff and being completely covered in hair now, looking exactly like a werewolf. He then threatens to kill them, and Pava calls Ackerman senpai, advising him to be careful because Babar became very strong using the tainted blood. Ackerman wasn't afraid of Babar, saying he's just a wild dog barking in the face of defeat, wondering why Pava thinks he's strong, thinking that Babar's mindset is weak. Ackerman starts taunting Babar, saying that he's not even close to a genius, to which Babar responds, asking if Ackerman is looking down on him. Ackerman answers, saying he isn't looking down on him, but rather he pities him since he's trying very hard to control his sanity, and if it weren't for the current situation, he wouldn't even lay his eyes on him. Babar goes crazy hearing Ackerman's trash talk and charges at him with his staff, wanting to kill him for belittling him. Ackerman panics as he realizes how fast Babar is, and knowing he can't dodge the attack, he just stands in place and Babar pierces his chest area. Iskar and Pava watch in disbelief as Clara makes it obvious that Ackerman is a fool for making Babar use that move. Clara explains that this attack causes the internal organs to burst, which means that it doesn't matter how good your recovery is, you die because of the damage whatsoever. They stood there for a few seconds when suddenly Ackerman grabbed the staff with his hand. Everyone got shocked, having their mouths wide open, wondering how the hell is he alive. Babar missed Ackerman's heart, and Ackerman tells him that if anyone else was Babar's target, he would have definitely died. Ackerman mocks Babar, saying he doesn't have enough experience for killing and the talent is just not enough. He calls him a puppy and explains that next time he should aim for the head if he wants to kill somebody without messing it up. Shocked, Babar realizes that he didn't hit Ackerman at all. Actually, the spear disappeared into his chest, into a black hole in his chest. Babar tries removing the spear, but realizes he is unable to move it at all this time. Some white tentacles start crawling on Babar's and Clara's body, and Clara starts panicking, begging Babar to help her. Ackerman smiles and tells them that nobody could save them now. He then tells them that they are the first offering for hell, saying that their life, strength, talent and future are the best nourishment for them. Babar begs Ackerman to release him, but Ackerman sends him to eternal darkness. Babar arrives at a strange dark place, screaming for somebody to let him out. Then he thinks that it's just some kind of a trick and wishes to leave the place as soon as possible. Some strange, disgusting, sticky black matter appears on his palm, and he hears the sound of sheep, wondering where the sheep is. But strangely, instead of the sheep, a monster-like head with sharp teeth appeared in front of him. Babar gets petrified as the monster tries to swallow him alive. Meanwhile, a white monster that Ackerman turned into keeps Clara trapped as Pava carries the squad leader, looking at the monster and not blinking, wondering what it is. The monster, or rather Ackerman, looked like some kind of a skeleton and had one red eye. Ackerman controlled his body, being happy he's able to transform into the creature he is right now without going insane. He feels great feeding Babar to the demons, feeling they are quite pleased with the offering, hoping for some kind of reward. Clara recognizes Ackerman's new form, calling it a ghoulish white, commenting that it's impossible since this beast can't be controlled by anyone, believing that Ackerman would definitely die trying to tame this beast mode. She wondered how a hunter could retain his sanity while controlling this kind of a monster. Ackerman heard what she said and told her that increasing her knowledge before death is very good, promising to fulfill her parents' wish of showing them a real nightmare. Iskar and Pava look at the event unfolding before their own eyes, and Ackerman's voice suddenly speaks to Pava, telling her to find her leader and explain that it's not a good idea to stay close to him at this moment. He orders her to tell her comrades that tonight the gatekeeper Ghoulish White joins the hunt as he opens his mouth and devours Clara in an instant. Wow! Ghoulish White on the hunt, let's go! Now, seeing what just happened, Pava immediately starts running away, holding the squad leader by his hand. And now we go back to Mr. Lin, who's looking outside of the window in his library, thinking about Nokin's weather getting weirder, hoping the rain should be stopping soon. He puts his hand on Candela's sword, feeling a bit uneasy having it on display, and decides to bring it to the bedroom and considers getting a soul holder later. He leaves the sword on the table across the bed, thinking of it as an evil warding talisman. While the slaughter and massacre in the city of Nokin continues, Lin goes to bed in hope to have a good dream, falling asleep as we see the dreamcatcher old while gave him activate again, meaning he should be having another lucid dream. As Mr. Lin falls asleep, he can see a raindrop and a lightning strike. Now he slowly opens his eyes and wakes up in a dream. He takes a couple of steps and stands while saying that this is another lucid dream. Since this is another lucid dream, he wonders where that beautiful silver-haired elf was. He was waiting for so long to have another lucid dream so he could talk to her, but now she's nowhere to be found. Mr. Lin slowly exhales and thinks how he shouldn't worry too much about it because he can't fully control his dreams anyway, as he wonders what kind of a dream he is in right now. He remembers reading Freud's work about dreams, where Freud states that dreams are usually an interpretation of subconscious desires one can have. Mr. Lin thinks he might be dreaming that he's in a video game right now, because ever since he traveled to this other world, Nokin, he couldn't play video games at all, so maybe his subconsciousness is yearning for them. Yes, that has to be it, Mr. Lin thinks, and as he's always right and never misunderstands anything, he's probably right now as well, bros. So he thinks how no wonder he would dream about video games, since Nokin is an ancient city and how the technology here is not yet advanced enough for video game consoles to exist. He imagines that he will be fighting a huge boss while the dramatic action music will be playing in the back. He picks up a stone and realizes that it has some special engravings on it. After looking at the ruins around him, Mr. Lin realizes that this place used to be some magnificent landscape while it was still intact, and after inspecting the piece of rock he's holding in his hand and realizes it is somehow familiar to him, and then it hits him. He saw similar engravings on the sword he got from Joseph. He thinks yet again how awesome he is for remembering this even in his sleep, and how normal people could never think of that. And he realizes this is because he used to be a professional folk sculpture examiner back in the day. He figures how his subconsciousness is definitely putting things he recently experienced in his life into this dream. He decides to explore this area because he already is here, thinking about what kind of surprises his subconsciousness has for him now. As he's walking through the ruins, he remembers how the last lucid dream he had, the area he was in was much smaller compared to this one, and thinks how this one even looks more realistic compared to the first lucid dream. He says that this place has received so much damage, and as he touches one of the walls nearby, the wall immediately crumbles, and Mr. Lin gets surprised because he didn't expect it to be this fragile. Then suddenly the entire building in front of him collapses as Mr. Lin gets a feeling of satisfaction similar to popping bubble wrap. So he decides he'll crush a couple more buildings since it's not a big deal because this is a dream after all, he thinks. He still thinks that this dream is a video game, and how even after exploring for a bit, nothing is still happening, but how he did find more and more corpses the more he explored. He finds one body that looks more preserved than most of the others, and after closely inspecting it, he realizes this man has longer ears than normal. He flips the mangled body over, and while one of the eyes spills out of its crushed head, Mr. Lin casually rips its ear off to inspect it even further, thinking how this must be an elven ear. Just look at this savage. Even if all of this is nothing but a dream, even in a dream I'd feel scared and disgusted by inspecting mangled bodies up close like this. But I guess Mr. Lin is not an ordinary human being like me. He also remembers Doris, thinking how she had a nice and realistic looking elven costume. Yet again, Mr. Lin thinks to himself how this dream is definitely a mixture of all the recent events that happened to him while awake. He feels like a folklore researcher once again while he is exploring these ruins, so he magically conjures a pen and paper in his hands and decides to write down his observations. By the way, he can conjure these items easily because this is all just a dream after all. He also thinks how after waking up, he should definitely try to draw these ruins. As he continues walking through these ruins, and after reaching the center of them, he stops for a moment because he sees a bright light shining on something in the distance. As he moves closer, he sees an elven figure kneeling down with a sword piercing his chest as if he committed seppuku. Now we know this elven guy is the ancient King Candela, who was a warrior of indescribable level and one of the most powerful indescribable people ever. As Mr. Lin is slowly approaching him, Candela lifts his head, opens his eyes and comments, saying how after waiting for millennia, his savior has finally arrived. Mr. Lin, at first a bit confused, figures this must be a cutscene in the video game dream he's having right now, and decides that he should just follow along the roleplay, but how he was expecting a huge final boss and a fight of historical proportions, and not something like this, but this might be an opening cutscene after which he'll receive such a quest, Mr. Lin thinks. He then thinks about the plot of the game, thinking how savior is usually used by people from ancient civilizations in games. So he figures out that some disaster must have struck this place, and thinks so this elf is either the reason for the disaster, or he tried to stop it but couldn't. And he decided to take his own life after realizing he couldn't save all the people around him, but he didn't die and was trapped like this, waiting for someone who can save the world to come by, and that someone should be the main player of the game, in this case Mr. Lin. And he also figures he understood the plot of the game perfectly, and honestly, he's not far from the truth, beside this not being a video game. Now after coming close to Candela, Mr. Lin realizes that the sword that pierces through Candela is actually the same sword Joseph gave him, and Mr. Lin gets even more sure that his subconsciousness had just created a story behind this sword. He admires his subconsciousness, thinking it did a really good job, and figures out that reading so many books has had this effect on it to do this good of a job. King Candela then thanks Mr. Lin for making the blade shine again and continues talking, saying how this is the third unforgivable sin that he has committed. Mr. Lin thinks how the sacred blade this guy is talking about is probably the blade that pierced his body and that it's the same blade Joseph gave him, and he also remembered how he thought the blade was a bit dirty and cleaned it up, so his subconsciousness has made up this scenario for that event. He then yet again admires himself because he managed to give himself credit in his dream, and then he even thanks himself for it as well. Mr. Lin thinks how in books that he read, characters like this elf are usually very lonely and rarely talk to anyone, which also causes a huge burden on their shoulders. And this burden is too difficult for them to carry, and as Mr. Lin sits on Candela's throne, while Candela is just casually kneeling in front of him with a huge sword coming through his chest, Mr. Lin continues thinking how he should help this man in his dream. Mr. Lin asks the man to tell him more about himself and other sins that he had committed, since this is the third one. Mr. Lin figures that this man would want to share his story with Mr. Lin, so that's why he mentioned his sins in the first place, so it isn't a bad thing for Mr. Lin to ask him these questions. Candela, with a slightly confused but also relieved face, bows down and tells Mr. Lin how it will be his honor to tell him the story of this sinner. Mr. Lin thinks how this man desperately wants to talk about his pain, and how in the books he read, villains also have big talks before finalizing their plan, or sometimes authors of the books make the villains talk for a bit before succeeding with their plan, so that the main character gets enough time to stop the villains. Candela then starts talking, saying how a millennia ago he got too arrogant and tried to kill one of the immortal rulers of the cosmos, and just after looking at this infinite immortal being, Candela lost his sanity. So this is the first sin of his foolishness. Then after came the sin of betrayal, which happened after King Candela slaughtered all the people that followed him because he had lost his sanity and went completely mad. And because he used the holy blade of elves to kill all the elves of this kingdom, he decided to seal his own fate as well with this very blade, and that was the last sin, the sin of being ignorant. He continues explaining, saying that he built this kingdom into the most powerful in the world with his very hands, but how his own hands were the end of the kingdom as well, and thus he got a name, the Exile Candela. Now Mr. Lin is sitting and carefully listening to this story, thinking how he almost got the entire plot correctly, and asks King Candela why does he call Mr. Lin his savior, because he didn't save neither him nor his kingdom. So he asks Candela if there's anything he would like for Mr. Lin to do, and Candela starts shaking because of how kind Mr. Lin is towards him, and apologizes to Mr. Lin because he never expected to be saved. Also, Mr. Lin asked him if there's something he'd like Mr. Lin to do because he thinks this guy is an NPC quest giver. So, Candela is shaking while telling Mr. Lin that he has already helped him immensely, but how his kingdom is just a point in the history now and he doesn't have any right over this land anymore, and that no matter what happens he will never be able to atone for his sins. Mr. Lin thinks how this guy has been so hard on himself for all these years, and that's why he's acting like a child getting scolded by his parents right now, and how even though he looks composed on the outside, he started crying as soon as someone asked him a simple question. So Mr. Lin decides to enlighten him with his usual soul healing words, saying that he already realized that he is sinful, but not wanting to atone for your sins means you're running away from your responsibility, and tells him if this is really the outcome he chooses, then he is a true coward, while looking at him with a strict and judgmental face. Mr. Lin continues speaking, saying that Candela didn't even think about the survivors of his people and what are they doing now and how are they coping by. And as Candela looks at him in utter shock, Mr. Lin continues speaking, saying how he's so powerful but decides to condemn himself and do nothing about fixing the situation, saying that he should have been tormented in front of everyone and how this would have been an atonement for his sins and not just sitting here idly waiting for nothing forever. Then Mr. Lin gets furious and starts yelling how Candela has no rights and deserves nothing more than this punishment for the actions he has done, and how even after spending 1,000 years here waiting, he learned nothing and is just waiting for someone to pity him and forgive him, while his people who survived are suffering even more than he is right now. Mr. Lin then puts his hand on Candela's shoulder and says how the only person who can save him right now is himself. Candela starts crying and telling Mr. Lin that he is right and how he was so ignorant that he couldn't realize this on his own, but how thanks to Mr. Lin's guidance he finally realizes what he needs to do, but he is afraid he'll do the same mistake one more time. Mr. Lin thinks so this quest probably wants him to give him guidance to this man for every decision he tries to make, as he looks at Candela, who falls in frustration in front of Mr. Lin, begging Mr. Lin to allow him to be his soldier. What is going on, bros? Candela is one of the most powerful warriors ever in the history of the world, and he is begging Mr. Lin to be like his king or something. Now Mr. Lin is left confused by this, not understanding why does Candela want to be his sword, and thinks how maybe this quest line wants Mr. Lin to have a party member traveling with him, thus offering him Candela as a party member, thinking how he gets a king of the entire elven city to be his follower, plus he will get the strongest sword right at the start of the quest. Mr. Lin clears his throat and asks Candela if he's really given this enough thought and if he's certain in this decision, while thinking to himself how he's not sure how long will the dream last, so he might as well give some soul healing words to this man here. Maybe it would be a good practice for when Mr. Lin wakes up. Mr. Lin then tells Candela how if he really wants to achieve his goals, he can't just listen to the words Mr. Lin says and do nothing, but how actually he needs to take initiative to accomplish his goals, because all of the sins he has done and all the time he has wasted while waiting here for thousands of years. Mr. Lin then thinks how he chose the perfect words for Candela, again admiring himself because the words he just told Candela are not going to break him even more, but will be a great guidance for him and his future actions. Mr. Lin continues speaking, telling Candela that people that he has long forgotten will never forgive him, and if he really chooses to stay here and do nothing about it, he'll stay a coward forever. Candela responds by saying that he understands what Mr. Lin is talking about and describes his soul as a worn out one because all of the time he has spent here wallowing, and how this feeling caused deep hatred within Candela, which was the reason for the curse to manifest on the sword as well. But after Mr. Lin has cleansed the curse, all that's left for Candela now is his obsession over his soul. He clenches his fist and tells Mr. Lin how he's right about Candela trying to use forgiveness from others to justify his escape. Candela continues speaking, telling Mr. Lin how he's also not wrong about saying Candela has no right, but what that means is that he doesn't have the right to stay weak anymore, and how he needs to return to his people, but not as a king this time, but as a simple exile. And before disappearing forever, Candela decides he needs to do something instead of just waiting for forgiveness, and comments how even though his land isn't his kingdom anymore, there are still elves alive in these lands, as he thinks to himself that after tens of thousands of years, even the strongest titans and elves who walk the lands are all just history now. How there were thousands of people killed because of the sword's curse as well, and all of their hatred intertwined with Candela's soul. He thinks how he witnessed the history of Azir unfold and even see the mightiest kingdom become nothing but a legend in the end. He also remembers how humans built a large city called Nokin, similar in glory to his kingdom that once was, and realizes that this kingdom of elves can no longer be rebuilt because time waits for no one. So the only thing Candela can do now for his people is to ignite all that's left within him instead of disappearing silently. He tells Mr. Lin there's one last thing left for him to do, and as Mr. Lin is carefully listening to him talk, book, Candela asks Mr. Lin to take this sword as his weapon and use it to slay the immortal being from that dream. Mr. Lin thinks how the quest is finally starting, but thinks how this quest sounds way too difficult for a beginner because the first boss fight is versus an immortal being right off the get-go. But maybe it's all just a tutorial, Mr. Lin thinks, while Candela continues speaking, telling Mr. Lin that thousands of years ago he himself tried to kill this immortal being, but after reaching it and looking it in the eyes, he lost his sanity, and this resulted in his kingdom paying the price as well, and how even after thousands of years he still has this same ambition, not for his own personal gain, but for the good of the people of his lands. Candela swears his complete loyalty to Mr. Lin and tells him that he'll give him the most valuable item he possesses and hopes that Mr. Lin can forgive him, and Mr. Lin interrupts him with a tired look on his face, saying that he's not really good at fighting, thinking to himself how he's just a normal bookstore owner and he doesn't have any higher power, and that even though this is a dream, he's never tried fighting in real life, so it would probably be burdensome for him in a dream as well, and thinks how this is the bad part of lucid dreams, because you are aware you are dreaming, so you probably are not capable of doing things which you usually can do in real life as well. Thinking that even if he can slay this boss easily because it's a dream, he can't really swing a sword and would look really bad while doing it, which would be embarrassing for him, and this would destroy his look as a soul healing instructor, and as such he needs to preserve his reputation because without it he won't be able to give guidance to his customers. As Candela comments how there's no need to worry and takes off his crown, he continues saying how he will be Mr. Lin's strength and his very sword while offering Mr. Lin his crown. He continues saying that even though he's not a king anymore and how this kingdom as well is long gone, there's no one left to take the crown, and he's offering it to Mr. Lin, saying that this is his most precious treasure, even though if others might consider it worthless, but to Candela it symbolizes that he's letting go of all the glory he had in his past. As Mr. Lin picks up the crown, he thinks how it's very light and how it's maybe made of branches of laurel, and suddenly the crown shines bright and vanishes in his hands, but after looking at his arm, Mr. Lin realizes that the crown didn't vanish, but he absorbed it somehow because now he has engravings from the crown on his arm. Candela explains how that mark on Mr. Lin's arm is the mark that represents the King of Elves, and that's the only way he can express his gratitude towards Mr. Lin. Mr. Lin, with a bit of a disappointed face, thinks how he doesn't feel anything has changed, but it just feels as if someone drew a bracelet on his hand. As the bright yellow light starts emitting from Candela, he grabs his sword while trying to stand up, and after he stands up completely, Mr. Lin looks at him and realizes that Candela is really tall, much taller than him. As Candela tells Mr. Lin to pull out the sword out of his chest, and now after doing so, Candela will fight alongside Mr. Lin from now on. Lin places his hand on the handle of the sword as a bright yellowish aura shone around it as if it's being ignited. King Candela shatters into pieces like a mirror glass, and Lin sees the king's happy moments that happened to him throughout his life. He sees him as a baby and being crowned as a king, holding his sword in the air as if he's going into a battle. Lin puts his hand into one of these big glass-like pieces and walks forward, coming through to the other side of the glass, seeing King Candela's corruption, looking at a being that was definitely an immortal one that Candela told him about. His eyes were red as if he's controlled by the strange being who looked more like the devil with his slender, ghastly hands and legs. The being had some bright light shining in his chest and face area, which seemed to be his soul and vision. Lin stood behind Candela, watching him look at what he described as an immortal being to him, and charging at it at an attempt to defeat this being. Candela took a firm grip on his sword, and shining in bright flames jumped towards the being. Lin watches him in action and thinks that Candela was actually very brave, and despite him going crazy, he was the only one brave enough to, in this era without light and fire, fight against this formidable enemy, carrying his bright sword, looking like he's carrying a sun, trying to defeat the evil and bring brightness to his kingdom. A thunder strikes the ground and Lin finds himself in another place, thinking that the scene in this video game just changed. His voice changed and his hair too, looking exactly like Candela, having elven ears and wielding a bright Candela sword in his hands. Lin figures out he is in one of the scenes from Candela's memory, seen in the broken glass, thinking this must be a dream in a dream. Lin turns around seeing a huge griffin who seems to be friendly. Then he tries understanding Candela's life by stepping into his shoes, realizing that Candela was powerful but also afraid of these immortal beings. So he begged Mr. Lin for guidance and then used his sacred blade to defeat the demon immortal. Petting the griffin, Lin proudly sees himself as Candela's savior, guessing he's now in control of Candela's soul. He pets the griffin and thinks about getting a pet cat in the shop because it's so comfy to pet this creature. He snaps out of his cute interaction with the griffin and starts focusing on the main task, remembering that Candela's main goal was to protect his people, getting ready for a battle. He holds his sword gently, thinking that the atmosphere is definitely a boss-like one, and looks around for some kind of a huge boss to appear. Lin grips his sword, knowing that Candela became a spirit of his own sword and feels like having it as a weapon is very exciting. He flexes his sword and Griffin hitting some poses and hears a rumble in the distance, wondering if this is the immortal being that Candela mentioned. Just a few seconds later, a huge hand holding an axe emerges from the fog illuminated by the lightning strikes. Now we see another rumbling, not in Lin's dream but in knocking streets this time. Miss G in her wolf form breathes heavily in a stance of alertness, thinking to herself that white wolf mutants are too strong. The blood starts dripping from her body as she stares at Helix, thinking that he and his team are here just to kill and they aren't human anymore. They're just beasts. Helix attacks her but misses, hitting the ground and causing great damage. He then turns towards Miss G's direction, looking at her jump over a hole filled with tainted blood. She gets a bad feeling about Helix never moving away from the hole and pushing all the dead hunters' bodies into the hole, as if he's benefiting from doing so. Miss G then figured out that he definitely defended the hole on purpose, and exactly at that moment Helix changed his form back into a human again and yelled at Miss G, saying that the offerings he provided are more than enough. The tainted blood shines brighter and G finally understands the reason why they don't care about the injured beasts and just throw them into the hole. Helix's plan being to create as many corpses as possible. The ground starts shaking and a strange symbol appears in the sky as the incubated egg cracks and blasts, giving Miss G chills to the bone. We see a monster appear in the sky and we know that this is the spawn of the magic mirror finally hatching and coming to this world. And what's more strange is that this same monster looks like the monster Lin is about to encounter in his dream. Helix, now in his human form, welcomes the monster, calling it his lord, the Lord of the Rain. Helix looks at his lord with great admiration, looking exactly like Candela when he encountered this monster, and says that he finally did it, thinking about successfully summoning him. He stands in front of him and celebrates, screaming on top of his lungs, saying, "Foolish mortals, rejoice! He's born." Bros, first I have to apologize for not making this video 2 hours. I severely underestimated how long would it take to make it, but the good news is that now that I know how long does it take to make it, I'll be able to make one every weekend from now on. 2 hours, not 1 hour. One more time, I'm sorry for this, and thank you so much for watching this video, bros, and for always supporting me. I really appreciate it a lot. Please like the video, and by the way, this is some crazy cliffhanger, so if you want to know what happens next, subscribe with bell notifications on so you see when the video goes live. Thank you so much one more time, bros. Stay awesome, bros, and peace.